Heinz Guderian has a simple mantra that he's been repeating since the start of this operation. In 3 days to the Meuse, on the 4th day across the Meuse. To achieve this, he's pushed his men to the very limits of their endurance. They've survived on sleepless nights, tons of pervitine, and the adrenaline of battle. Now, today is the 4th day, and come hell or high water, Guderian orders that they will cross the river Meuse. I'm Indy Neidell, and welcome to our World War II mini-series 10 Days in Sedan, where we cover the German thrust through the Ardennes, the rage of the Reich, and the new confrontation between old enemies at Sedan, the crucible where the fate of the Axis and Allies converge. Join me as we explore the course of the battle and its aftermath. The traffic jams that stalled German progress through the Ardennes yesterday continue to threaten the timetable of the whole operation. Vehicle columns now stretch from the Meuse all the way back to the Rhine River. So yeah, the Germans are going to have a hard time attacking, but maybe Allied incompetence is going to save their bacon. Remember how French and British aircraft stayed away from Ewald von Kleist's Panzers yesterday evening? Well, the Germans expect that with their forces now massing on the northern bank of the Meuse, there'll definitely be some bombing raids today. The 1st Flat Corps is rushed forward to provide AA defense for the tanks, and the Luftwaffe ramps up their own fighter support over the Ardennes. But to their surprise, the skies stay quiet even today. Allied units on the ground at Sedan are not in much better shape. Today, the 71st Infantry Division under Joseph Baudet begins arriving to the east of Henri Lafontaine's 55th Infantry, taking over the sector near Angecourt and allowing Lafontaine to begin setting up defense in depth behind the riverline fortifications guarded by the 147th Fortress Regiment. Sounds good in theory. These guys aren't ready for a fight just now. The 55th, as I've mentioned before, is mainly composed of older and undertrained conscripts with poor command and control. As they've moved northwest to guard the rear of the 147th, they lose a lot of cohesion and struggle to get to grips with their new positions. The 71st aren't really doing any better because Baudet has marched them nearly 60 kilometers in the past day or so, and they're in no condition to fight before they get some rest. Heinz Guderian, commander of the 19th Panzer Corps, is not going to allow them that rest. At noon, the first bombs begin dropping on the French. A wave of Junker 87 Stukas fly in and drop their payloads, followed by level bombers, followed by more Stukas. They continue this bombing systematically for the next 4 hours, and are joined by Guderian's artillery about 3:10 that afternoon, and the intensity of the bombardment reaches a fever pitch in the last 20 minutes from 3:40 to 4 o'clock. Rather than me telling you what it was like, I'll let a French soldier from the 55th Infantry do the honors. Explosions keep crashing all over the place. All you can feel is the nightmare noise of the bombs, whose whistling becomes louder and louder the closer they get. You have the feeling they're zeroed in precisely on you. You wait with tense muscles. The explosion comes like relief, but then there's another one. Then there are 2 more, and 10 more. The explosions blend in a ceaseless thunder. When the intensity of that sound abates for a moment, you can hear yourself gasping for air. The bunker trembles. Bombs of all caliber are being dropped. The small ones come down in packets. The big ones do not whistle. As they hit, the noise deceptively sounds like an approaching train. The noise from the siren of the diving aircraft drills into your ears and tears at your nerves. You feel as if you want to scream and roar. Pretty terrifying stuff, though the material effect on the bunkers and defensive positions is far less than the morale shock. The French artillery is still operational. Their machine guns are still sighted. Most bunkers make it out of the ordeal intact or with only minor damage. That morale shock is pretty huge though, and a lot of elements of the 55th Division start breaking already, fleeing the ominous sirens of the Stukas as fast as their legs can carry them. As soon as the bombs subside, the assault begins. Rubber boats are hauled into the water, paddles throw up splashes and spray, and the French machine guns burst into life. The 10th Panzer Division attempts a crossing at Vaudelancourt. Problem there is that the approach to the river is between 600 and 800 meters of exposed and open territory, and the French defenses on the opposite side of the Meuse are still very much operational. Artillery begins to hit the approaching troops, while machine gun fire cuts many of them down as they run the gauntlet, rubber dinghies in hand. If they don't get killed outright, then it's more than likely that their boats are full of holes by the time they make it to the river. So these initial attempts are quite easily broken up by the French. A couple of hours later, though, some individual squads managed to get across, and by 7 in the evening begin circling around the French bunkers, picking them off one at a time, making things gradually easier for their comrades on the opposite bank. Further west, the 2nd Panzer Division attempts their own crossing at Donchéry. This does not go any better than the attempt at Vaudelancourt, perhaps even worse. French artillery aggressively pounds their positions as they begin their approach and completely breaks up their assault squads. So around the same time 10th Panzer are beginning to get across, 2nd Panzer has fully stalled and is crying out for support from other German units. That support could very well come from the 1st Panzer Division in the center, who have been making their own crossing opposite the village of Glea. Here, they've actually been very successful. See, there's a bit of a gap in the fortifications just here. The gap is about 2 kilometers between Bunker 305 at Glea and Bunker 211 near the Pont Neuf Bridge. The approach also has much more cover than the others, so the assault boats make it to the river pretty comfortably, and the first wave makes it across the Meuse with only minor casualties. Guderian himself crosses the river in the second wave a short time later. Next to them, the Großdeutschland Regiment is attempting to cross at Pont Neuf, and the fortifications quickly show them why aiming for the gap is a far better idea, because their crossing fails. Assault teams from 1st Panzer immediately push west after they've crossed the river, hitting some of the French fortifications in the rear, specifically the fortifications which overlook Donchéry and are holding 2nd Panzer Division back. As these positions start falling to the assault squad, 2nd Panzer try their luck once again, and this time a small group on the division's left, so east of Donchéry, manages to make it across the Meuse about 8 p.m. It'll still be another couple of hours until they can start bringing troops across in larger numbers. All 3 Panzer divisions now have elements across the river, and German troops are popping up behind French lines and causing havoc. Confusion and panic start to overtake the troops of the 55th Division, who begin fleeing south in increasingly large numbers. Though some pockets of French soldiers, mainly of the 147th Regiment, linger on the banks of the Meuse, continuing to resist the Germans. But as the evening rolls on, German pontoon bridges, capable of bringing their panzers across the river, are beginning to take shape. So all is lost. The crossings have succeeded, right? Well, not necessarily. French forces in the sector are not beaten and are actually beginning to grow stronger. Troops under Jean Flavigny, the 3rd Motorized Infantry and 3rd Armored Divisions, start to arrive in the area tonight. The German bridgehead is still small, far smaller than Guderian once, and still only contains a fraction of his total force. A counterattack is very possible, and a counterattack is ordered. The 55th Division, or what's left of it, is focusing on containing the breach and maintaining linear front lines World War I style. But overnight it's going to be strengthened by the 205th and 213th Infantry Regiments and 4th and 7th Tank Battalions from Corps Commander Pierre Gransard's reserve. This force is ordered to retake the area and throw the Germans back across the Meuse. That is supposed to get going tomorrow morning, as soon as they're in position, so we'll talk more about that next time. While Guderian's Panzer Corps fights to cross the Meuse at Sedan, 2 more German corps are fighting to cross the river further north. The first of this is Hermann Hoth's 15th Motorized Corps, which is aiming to cross the Meuse at HOUX and DINANT. Hoth's corps is made up of the 5th Panzer Division under Max von Hartlieb and the 7th Panzer Division under Erwin Rommel. Things are quite difficult here for the French because the unit facing the assault, Camille Dufay's 18th Infantry Division, does not have all of its regiments here at the front, and communications have all but broken down. In fact, the first men of Hoth's corps have actually already crossed the river already. These were some troops of the 3rd Company of the 8th Reconnaissance Battalion, part of the 5th Panzer Division. Later, Rommel will say that these are his men, that the 7th Panzer Division were first to cross. But actually, these motorcycle troops were only temporarily under his command. Anyway, last night, they discovered a weak point in the French lines between Ivoire and Dinant, centered on the little island of HOUX. Here, they managed to cross the river at a weir and establish a bridgehead. This morning, Hartlieb's 5th Panzer Division sends over 3 battalions of infantrymen who start making the assault crossing. They're up against the 2nd Battalion of the French 39th Infantry Regiment, who have only been inserted into the line recently and are very isolated, but nonetheless, the defenders fight hard, using machine guns in flanking positions and calling in artillery. Even with the backing from a few Panzers, the casualties are heavy on the German side, as one after-action report puts it. The dead are floating in the water. The wounded desperately cling to the lock gates. They call for help, but nobody can help them. Nevertheless, by midday, the Germans have eliminated French resistance and have pushed 4 kilometers and start to threaten the village of Olevastia. The French do start to make some counterattacks against HOUX, but these are pretty ineffective. The crossing at HOUX is in a bit of a weird location. It's in the French 11 Corps sector, but it's on the extreme left, very close to the boundary with Jean Bouffet's 2nd Corps. In the end, it is 2nd Corps that takes on HARTLIEB'S crossing, with the 5th Motorized Infantry Division moving across the Corps boundary to help out the 18th Infantry Division. But from the start, that attack is running behind schedule. The division's commanding officer, Jean Boucher, restores contact with the 18th only about 7:30 a.m., and it isn't until around 11 that he starts setting things in motion. He brings up the 2nd Battalion of the 129th Motorized Infantry Regiment, but the men are attacked by Stukas during the march, which delays things further. Finally, by early evening, he's ready to go and has added some tanks and armored cars of the 14th Dragoon Regiment and 4th Armored Reconnaissance Regiment. The aim is to strike at the emerging German salient centered on Olevastia. But with all the delay, it takes until 9 p.m. for things to be ready, and by then the artillerymen are worried about the lack of light. The attack is cancelled and postponed until tomorrow morning. Rommel's 7th Panzer Division is just to the south of HARTLIEB'S 5th, and he aims to cross the Meuse at 2 points. The first of these, what we'll call Rommel's northern site, is just to the south of HOUX. The second is further south at Leffe, which is on the northern edge of the city of Dinant. If the name Leffe sounds familiar to you, then yes, this is where the beer comes from. The 7th Panzer Division begins its assault about 6 a.m. following bombing raids by the Luftwaffe. At the northern site, Rommel deploys the 6th Rifle Regiment and the 7th Motorcycle Battalion. Rommel puts most of his effort into the southern site, where he has the 7th Rifle Regiment with support from the 25th Panzer Regiment. Things here are really very difficult for the Germans. The Meuse is about 80 meters wide, and Rommel's men paddled their rubber boats into a wave of fierce French defensive fire. The machine gunners and mortar men of the French 66th Infantry Regiment are positioned in houses and bunkers built into the rocks high above the river. Some French troops are holed up in the ruins of Crèvecoeur Castle. From this 15th century fortress, artillery observers call down fire on France's 20th century enemy. On the German side, Luftwaffe support is limited because the Air Force is busy with Guderian's effort at Sedan. By 10 a.m., Rommel's troops have been beaten back with heavy losses, and the operation hangs in the balance. But before too long, the Germans will make a successful crossing here. It's in these next few hours that much of the aura that will surround Erwin Rommel for the rest of his career is created. Rommel always has one eye on his public image. But putting aside his talent for self-promotion, it's clear that he is key to the eventual German success. On the 13th of May, crisis followed crisis in the sector of the 7th Panzer Division, so that Rommel was constantly shuttling back and forth between the two crossing sites. His forte, however, was always to lead from way up front. He sent panzer units forward and personally directed them into their positions. He coordinated fire support and somehow managed to round up more rubber boats. Nevertheless, as Rommel himself reports, the mission seemed to be failing. A renewed crossing attempt was ventured only after he had ordered additional panzers and even individual artillery pieces to move forward to fire on the enemy bunkers. In the afternoon, Rommel mostly stayed with the northern crossing group. For this purpose, he, the division commander himself, jumped into the water up to his hips and for a while pitched in personally. When the ferry was ready, he was the first to cross over in his command panzer. By the evening, Rommel has secured 2 small bridgeheads. The French do make a counterattack against the northernmost of these, with Jean Martin's 11th Corps responsible for the effort. But from the start, Martin doesn't have a great picture of what's going on. By the morning of May 13th, he's aware the Germans have crossed at HOUX, but he only finds out about Rommel's crossings at noon when he visits the 18th Infantry Division's command post. He then orders an attack against Rommel's northern bridgehead. His chosen force is the bulk of the 39th Infantry Regiment under Colonel Dugenet, which had been kept in reserve. Dugenet has support from Renault R-35 tanks, from the 3rd Company 6th Tank Battalion, and armored cars from the 1st Light Cavalry Division. Fire support from 4 artillery battalions is promised. The designated jumping off time of 8 p.m. is postponed to 9 p.m. at Dugenet's request. Then, just 15 minutes before the new start time, Dugenet reports his infantry units are still not ready. Undeterred, the tanks and armored cars roll forward alone into the night. They fight well, but this is not a proper combined arms attack. A half hour late, the French armor attacked, driving to the forest, where they captured 7 motorcyclists but encountered no significant enemy forces. Even with the delay, the French infantry failed to arrive in time to accompany the tanks, and, unable to hold the terrain they'd cleared, the Renaults withdrew. The French launched no counterattack against Rommel's southern bridgehead near Leffe, which is in fact the site which the German general has already assessed to be the most promising. Because bridging resources are limited, it is here he orders his engineers to build the one military bridge he has the capacity to build. But unlike Guderian, Rommel doesn't wait for the bridge to be ready before he starts bringing over his armor. By morning, the engineers will have transported about 30 panzers across the river on ferries. About 45 kilometers south of Dinant, Hans Reinhardt's 41st Army Corps is making its own crossing at MONTHERMÉ. Here, the charge is led by units of Werner Kempf's 6th Panzer Division, who are up against the French 42nd Colonial Infantry of the 102nd Division Fortress. The French troops occupy well-prepared positions and have blown the bridge, forcing the Germans to attempt a river crossing under heavy fire. Although the 42nd is a Reserve B regiment, they have an unusually high percentage of professional officers and NCOs, and are well equipped with machine guns. The terrain here also really favors the defenders. In the area around MONTHERMÉ, the Meuse meanders through the Ardennes in a canyon-like gorge that greatly resembles the valley of the Rhine near Lorelei Rock. The bizarre rock formations, which attract so many tourists, created a nightmare here for Reinhardt. Along the northern bank of the Meuse, opposite MONTHERMÉ, rises a 200-meter-high cliff called Envelope, which several rockfalls interrupt. From here, the Germans had to try to get to the river. In the process, they were completely under the observation of the enemy, who was superior in artillery. Kemp's force don't have a whole lot of Luftwaffe support, and his first 2 assault crossings are forced back by the French defenders. It isn't until the early afternoon that Kemp's infantry manages to get across the river. By the evening, they have taken MONTHERMÉ. Once again, the French fight tenaciously. Lieutenant Paul Barbast's company holding MONTHERMÉ was soon overwhelmed. Rather than retreat, the 27-year-old Barbast grabbed an FM-24-29 light machine gun and led a desperate counterattack with his last 2 squads. But he was killed in action. By 1600 hours, the Germans were pushing south down the peninsula, but were soon stopped by the rest of the French battalion, which was well supported by artillery. For the moment, Reinhardt's bridgehead at MONTHERMÉ was contained. By the early evening, the German engineers are beginning to build a pontoon bridge over the Meuse, ready to start bringing the armor over. But Reinhardt's bridgehead is relatively small and well contained. MONTHERMÉ stands at the end of a narrow peninsula, and although the Germans have taken the town itself, their route south is blocked by the 42nd Colonial Infantry Regiment. Then there's the problem of bringing up enough force to exploit the crossing. See, much of Reinhardt's Panzer Corps is still stuck far away from the crossing. The 8th Panzer Division is still a couple of days away. Reinhardt's corps is moving so slowly that some of the infantry that was supposed to be following in his wake has actually caught up with him. His 2nd Motorized Infantry Division is supposed to be crossing the Meuse at Nozonville, but they won't arrive until tomorrow. In the meantime, the 3rd Infantry Division of his neighboring 3rd Corps have begun their own crossing at Nozonville today. They were supposed to be far behind Reinhardt, but have caught up and taken over the crossing point because of all the traffic chaos. As we shall see next time, Reinhardt running behind schedule leads to a real crisis, which threatens the very existence of Panzer Group Kleist as an independent formation. That is where I will leave things today, with German panzers and infantry crossing the Meuse not just at Sedan, but into other sectors as well. As we've seen, the French troops have, on the whole, fought valiantly, and those German bridgeheads are tenuous at best. Will the Germans be able to reinforce and expand them? A lot of their vehicles and infantry are still stuck in those mighty traffic jams. For their part, the French have plenty of force for containing and perhaps even repelling those bridgeheads. But so far, French command has been racked by poor communications, lethargy, and indecision. Have they got what it takes to push the Germans back? We shall have to see. Next time we'll see how those crossings turn out. We'll head back to look at the fighting in Sedan as the Allies launch a massive airstrike on the German forces there. We'll also see how Panzer Group Kleist ends up at war not only with the French, but with its superiors at Army Group A. Make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss a single episode of this 10-part miniseries. Time Ghost Army Ardennes Amigo of the Week is Nicholas Warlick, and these are the newest commissioned officers. It is thanks to the Time Ghost Army that we can put together things like this, and our long-format documentary that will come out after these episodes are finished. Join the Army at timeghost.tv or patreon.com. I'll see you next time.